NATO summit. President Donald Trump holds key meetings with world leaders in England. What he says about growing conflicts and trade deals. Landmark report. House Democrats are preparing the evidence they say proves the president should be impeached. We're on Capitol Hill. March for Life. New details in the nation's largest rally for the unborn. And a humble heart. Pope Francis tells the faithful a foolproof way to be fearless. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. President Donald Trump fires insult at foreign leaders and Democrats in Washington. The president is in London for the NATO summit. As he addresses issues abroad, he's downplaying impeachment proceedings back home. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump began his first of 2 days at the NATO conference by rebuking French President Emmanuel Macron. And even though he's thousands of miles away from Washington, what's happening in Congress is still fresh on President Trump's mind.
I think it's very unpatriotic of the Democrats to put on a performance where they do that. I do. I think it's a bad thing for our country.
As he continues to slam the impeachment probe, President Trump took aim today at ally French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron says NATO is experiencing brain death as a result of diminished U.S. leadership under President Trump. The president called those comments very, very nasty.
But I was very surprised. You just can't go around making statements like that about NATO. It's very disrespectful.
Later, tension continued when President Trump suggested President Macron should take back some ISIS fighters that came from France.
Would you like some nice ISIS fighters?
And President Trump pushed back when Macron said the focus should be on defeating ISIS.
This is why he's a great politician, because that was one of the greatest non-answers I've ever heard.
Along with Macron, the president also met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada today. The president has long called for NATO countries to increase defense spending. He joked Canada is almost meeting its commitment.
I have confidence. Just slightly delinquent. But no, some are major delinquent. Some are way below 1%, and that's unacceptable.
Looking to deals with non-NATO countries, the president says he has no deadline for a trade agreement with China.
In some ways, I like the idea of waiting till after the election for the China deal.
The president also showed support for protesters in Iran today. In a tweet, he said, "The U.S. supports the brave people of Iran who are protesting for their freedom. We have under the Trump administration and always will." Wyatt.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. And House Democrats push ahead with their efforts to impeach the president. In a report released today, they say President Trump abused the power of his office and endangered national security. The House Intelligence Committee votes tonight on that 300-page report. It summarizes their investigation into Trump's request to Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden's son. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports.
Good evening, Wyatt. The tale of two reports. Republicans, in their 123-page rebuttal, defend the president, while Democrats say the president broke his oath of office and obstructed Congress. The Democrats' report now heads to the House Judiciary Committee. They're the panel charged with writing possible articles of impeachment.
Adjourned.
Democrats say the president pressured Ukraine to investigate his political rivals.
This is not a great time for the country to have a president revealed as doing something so counterproductive to the national interest. It would be wonderful if there were some benign explanation. I'm struggling to think what it would be at this point, but we have to at least allow for that possibility.
Democrats could begin drafting articles of impeachment soon. Republicans condemn the investigation, writing, "The Democrats' obsession with impeaching President Trump has paralyzed their already thin legislative agenda. Less than a year before the 2020 election, and Democrats in the House still cannot move on from the results of the last election. Some commentators suggest the House could scrap impeachment and just censure the president.
President Trump did nothing wrong.
President Trump says Democrats are just in search of a crime.
Now they want to go to censure because they have no case for impeachment. So they want to go to censure. I don't want them to go to censure. I did nothing wrong. I don't mind being censured if you do something wrong. I did nothing wrong.
Censure is a formal, symbolic critique only used against one previous president, Andrew Jackson.
Who am I to advise my Democratic colleagues about what to do? Censure would probably gain some bipartisan support.
The House Judiciary Committee picks up the impeachment hearings tomorrow. They're going to be questioning several constitutional scholars about what the Constitution actually says about impeachable offenses. President Trump complained that Democrats got to pick 3 of the lawyers, Republicans only 1. Here at the Capitol, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Senator Kamala Harris says she is ending her presidential campaign. The California Democrat once was considered a frontrunner in a crowded field, but her campaign has since been eclipsed by several other candidates. Harris had tried to recapture her strong start by spending a lot of time in Iowa, where there will be a caucus in early February. Harris is in favor of abortion and same-sex marriage. Senator Johnny Isakson delivered his farewell speech today on Capitol Hill. The 3-term Republican from Georgia is stepping down because of health issues, and he sounded a little worried about the direction of the country.
I'm telling you from my heart that after 45 years in elected office, raising 3 children and 8 grandchildren, which my kids have done a great job raising them, living in a great community, living in a great church, doing the things I've done, I see some of it slipping away.
Isakson voted for many pro-life laws. Previously, he had been in favor of abortion. Republican Governor Brian Kemp will announce Isakson's replacement tomorrow. There are concerns he will name a businesswoman with ties to the abortion industry. The Navy SEAL at the center of a controversial legal case has retired. Military officials say Eddie Gallagher left the service as he had planned on November 30th. Gallagher has been in the spotlight after President Trump intervened in the war crimes case against him. The president insisted Gallagher should keep his rank in the Navy and should not lose his SEAL status. The Navy secretary lost his job after the defense secretary accused him of mishandling the Gallagher's case. Typhoon Kamuri barreled across the Philippines with fierce winds and rain today, leaving at least 4 people dead and forcing hundreds of thousands of villagers to abandon their communities. Kamuri toppled trees and electrical posts, ripped off 10 roofs, and battered an airport as it blew across Luzon, the country's largest and most populous island. Iranian state television announced today security forces shot and killed what it described as rioters in multiple cities. The violence is the latest amid recent protests over the spike in government-set gasoline prices. It's the first time authorities have offered any sort of accounting for the violence, which is believed to have killed more than 200 people since mid-November. A top European human rights official says a migrant camp in Bosnia should close immediately. Hundreds of refugees are stranded in the snow and ice in a makeshift tent camp in the northwestern part of the country. The camp has almost no facilities, and several international aid organizations say it's unfit for people in part because it is located next to a minefield. The Council of European Commissioner for Human Rights condemned the living conditions, saying this is not a place for human beings.
It should be closed as we speak. This is not a place for human beings. As a person born in Bosnia and Herzegovina and coming from here, I'm really ashamed that something like this exists in my country.
Several hundred migrants who are staying in the camp refused food and water today to protest the situation. Government officials say a new facility for migrants near the current shelter will not be ready for nearly 3 weeks. The group overseeing the reconstruction of Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral is meeting for the first time. Officials are discussing the roadmap for the building's reconstruction after a fire in April damaged one of the most well-known Catholic churches in the world. Shortly after the blaze, French President Emmanuel Macron made an ambitious pledge that Notre Dame would be rebuilt by 2024. The tight timeline has prompted widespread disbelief among architects. The Vatican is preparing for the Jubilee year, marking the 100th anniversary of the proclamation of Our Lady of Loreto, patroness of aviators. The Holy Father visited Loreto in March. The Italian basilica is known for enshrining the Blessed Virgin Mary's house. The Jubilee year starts this Sunday, December 8th, and will end on December 10th next year. Pope Francis recently named December 10th the official feast day of Our Lady of Loreto. Edward Pinton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Edward, tell us about how the Church will mark the Jubilee year and what exactly is a Jubilee year?
Yes, well, it will begin with a solemn procession with Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Secretary of State, to the main square of Loreto on December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. It will also be marked by the next day 3 statues of Our Lady and images of Our Lady being sent on pilgrimages to various regions in Italy and across the world. There'll also be pilgrimages throughout the year and an air show, culminated an air show with the Freccia Tricolore, which is the equivalent of the Blue Angels. The Jubilee year is actually marked by the Church really for the remission of sins and universal pardon, but occasionally you have these special Jubilee years which mark a special anniversary, which is what's happening in this case.
Well, tell us more. How did this particular devotion come about?
Yes, well, it's quite interesting. This devotion came about, actually goes back to World War I, where you had aviators who had a devotion to Our Lady of Loreto. They used to call their planes flying houses, and of course Loreto is famous for the angels taking the house of Our Lady of Nazareth over to Loreto from Nazareth. So there's that connection. Benedict the 15th gave the devotion to Our Lady of Loreto made her a patroness of aviators back in 1920. So that's how this all started 100 years ago.
So interesting. I also want to ask you about another important issue. Today, the Pope issued a message marking the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. What did the Holy Father have to say?
Yes, well, he said great progress has been made for people with disabilities in terms of welfare and health and medical care. But he did say that they're still victims of a throwaway society. He said they lack belonging and participation, and he called for a change in mentality so that they avoid discrimination.
Sounds like a very important issue. Both issues, both the Jubilee year and the message marking International Day of Persons with Disabilities, both issues, of course, that we'll continue to pray for. Edward Pinta, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Coming up, analysis after the Supreme Court hears arguments in its first case about gun rights in nearly 10 years. And preparing for the March for Life. The beatification of Bishop Fulton Sheen, scheduled for later this month, has been postponed. The Catholic Diocese of Peoria in Illinois says in a statement, quote, "The Holy See decided to postpone the date of beatification at the request of a few members of the Bishops' Conference who have asked for further consideration. Bishop Daniel Jenke of Peoria says he is deeply saddened by the decision. No new date has been set." There are only 52 days to go until the nation's largest rally for the unborn. The theme for the 2020 March for Life in Washington is Life Empowers. Pro-life is pro-woman. Organizers today announced the names of 5 speakers who will address the marchers on January 24th.
We've got so many inspiring stories, people who've survived abortions that will be telling their story. I mean, it's so vulnerable and beautiful, and I think it's really, the heart of the pro-life movement is hearing about these personal stories.
Melissa Oden, who survived a failed saline infusion abortion, is on the list of confirmed speakers for the kickoff rally before the march, along with Louisiana State Senator Katrina Jackson, a pro-life Democrat. The Supreme Court is weighing arguments in its first case about gun rights in nearly a decade. The lawsuit brought by gun owners in New York City challenged the city's restrictions on transporting licensed, locked, and unloaded guns outside the city limits. Joining me now to take a closer look at this case and its broader implications is Amy Swearer, Senior Legal Policy Analyst at the Heritage Foundation. Amy, welcome into the broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with just a central question in all of this. New York City repealed the rule at the center of this case last summer. So why is this case still going before the Supreme Court?
So this case is still before the Supreme Court, primarily because of when, why, and how New York went about changing its laws. So New York waited until after the Supreme Court had granted cert in this case, decided to hear the case, and then it slightly changed its laws, loosened the restrictions a little bit, only because it saw the handwriting on the wall that said, the Supreme Court is probably going to strike this down. So the plaintiffs in this case are essentially arguing, look, New York has not been acting in good faith. We have no promise that if the Supreme Court doesn't rule on the merits, that New York is not just going to go back, either undo the law or enforce it in an unconstitutional way.
The attorneys for the gun owners who originally brought this case say there's still a live issue to be settled here. So what are the broader Second Amendment implications at play here?
So the broader Second Amendment implications at play have to do with where the right to keep and bear arms extends outside of the home. Sort of what protections do gun owners have outside of the home? Because if you recall, in Heller and McDonald, the two big cases from the last 10 years, in those cases, the Supreme Court determined, there is an individual right to keep and bear arms inside the home, particularly for handguns. But it didn't expand that ruling beyond that. And so the big issue now is, what protections do gun owners have outside of the home, whether through concealed carry, whether through the transportation of firearms. And so those are the main issues being decided in this case.
Gun control advocates are closely following this case as well. What are just some of their concerns?
I think the biggest concern for gun control advocates is that if the Supreme Court comes down with a broad ruling that says there are broad protections for gun owners outside of the home, that it really puts in jeopardy a lot of not just gun control proposals that have been put out there, but laws that are currently on the books, such as for concealed carry, and even beyond that to things like types of firearms and magazine capacity restrictions that are already on the books in other states. And so for them, really the breadth of the ruling is going to be what's at issue.
How did the justices respond? Or does anything stand out from their questions that you can tell?
So it's always hard because you don't want to read too much into the questions that are put up at oral argument. But what was interesting to me was that even from some of the more liberal justices, when it got to the merits and the logic of the case itself, of the restrictions themselves, even some of the more liberal justices, like Justice Ginsburg, for example, seemed to question the logic of some of the transportation laws and just how strict they were, for reasons like, if a person can stop at a second home but not at a vacation home, for example, why would we want them to leave the gun unattended in the home that they're no longer in? So sort of the logical analysis of that seemed to come up even from the liberal bloc.
Any sense then when we can expect to hear how the justices will proceed, or if they will?
Well, so my guess is if they determine that the case is moot, we might hear that pretty early on in the term. However, if they determine, like this case is not moot, we're going to move on to the merits. It's really, who knows when that might come out. It can come out really, any time from now to the end of the term itself, when we're looking at late spring. So that's always, your guess is as good as mine, and it really just depends on really the route the court wants to take here.
If the majority of the justices is persuaded that this case is moot, are there any other Second Amendment cases that could come before the court this term?
There are. So there are several that actually seem to touch more on substantive issues, such as concealed carry. There are a couple that are challenging what are called may issue permits in several states. There are also challenges to laws that restrict magazine capacity, and even some more assault weapons ban challenges that are right now pending before the court in a cert petition stage. So given that at least the more conservative justices have indicated a willingness to take on these Second Amendment issues in a way that they haven't for the last decade, that may be something that does happen where the court says this case is moot, but we might look at one of the other cases in the pipeline. Okay, we'll continue to keep our eye on these cases to see if everything does come through the pipeline. And obviously, like I said, it's a big, important issue for the broader implications of the Second Amendment. Amy Swearer, Senior Legal Policy Analyst at the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Up next, as Advent begins, a diocese in Virginia launches a campaign to help transform the world. We'll explain.
La rivelazione, la presenza di Dio nel mondo incomincia così.
Pope Francis says the Spirit of God can only grow in a humble heart. At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says God makes his power known to the little rather than the mighty. And as little ones, we should be ready to take risks and be fearless. A Catholic bishop is calling on the faithful in his diocese to join an initiative to further prayer, service to others, and self-sacrifice during this Advent and Christmas season. In a video message, Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington called on the almost 500,000 Catholics throughout the diocese to join in on the Just One Yes, or JOY campaign to help transform the world around us. Joining me now to tell us more about this campaign is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese of Arlington. Billy, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Wyatt.
Tell us more about sort of the inspiration behind this idea and how it kind of came about?
So Therese Bernpohl is our director of family life, and she had this idea because we get a lot of questions from people saying, we look at the world around us, we look at what's going on, and we say, is there anything we can really do? It can be kind of depressing at times. And the reality is we're Catholics. Yes, there's something we can do. So the idea of the campaign was that through prayer, self-sacrifice, and service, we can change not just us, but we can change the world, that we really believe that prayer is efficacious. It works. And so this campaign came about from that. So it was a good response to some things that we were hearing from the faithful. And the acronym of JOY comes naturally out of the Just One Yes, responding to Mary's yes. Mary said yes. We should emulate that. We should respond to that call to say yes to God whenever we can. So the campaign's fun because people can do just a little thing, just say yes to one little thing, or you can do a big thing. You can do, confession every week and Mass every day, or you can just decide, I'm going to do an act of contrition a day, or I'm going to go and help my local food pantry or food bank. I'm going to assist my pastor in whatever is needed at the parish. And you can choose little things, and hopefully those little things become many other yeses as you go. But by doing it in the Advent and Christmas seasons, it's kind of time-stamped so people feel like, okay, this is a good start if I need to rejuvenate something within myself.
It does seem like the timing here is perfect. The campaign launched Sunday. What's the response been so far?
The response has been really good. We were hoping for a good response, obviously, but so it launched on Sunday, obviously the first Sunday of Advent, and within just a few hours of sending out the launch email, we had several hundred people that had signed up to receive a daily meditation, which was wonderful to see. And since then, we've gotten a lot more, and so we're closing in on almost 2,000 sign-ups for people basically logging that I'm saying yes, I'm responding to this. They'll receive the meditation, and we're tracking through social media, seeing what the energy's been, and it's been really nice.
So how do you think, or how do you hope this will enrich Catholics as individuals and then as the community overall?
Sometimes faith can be a little bit daunting because if you've been away from the faith or if you've been going to church but not doing anything extra, you don't really know where to start. So the idea is just say yes to something. Find something that you can do. What's closest to you? Maybe someone in need. Maybe there's a suffering that you're going through that you can offer up for somebody else, or maybe you can just say a simple prayer to get you started. But just one yes can change you, and it can then change your family, it can then change your community, and it can change the world. We really believe that as Catholics. So for those who feel forlorn in their own life or what they're seeing around them, just one yes can get you started to making that change that you're looking for.
Of course, I love the acronym JOY there. Just to follow up, I know the Diocese of Arlington and Virginia is so active. What are just some of the other programs to help people in need around this time of year?
It's a good question. We get that question a lot, and the good part of the answer is we're doing these things all year, but there's a renewed interest from people, maybe to participate or they just want to know what's going on in their church. But I was at a St. Mary of Sorrows, for instance, this weekend, and they were doing a big collection for the St. Lucy food pantry. So St. Lucy collects 1.2 million pounds of food a year. That's 11 tons a week, if you can believe it or not. So we get a lot of extra collections, a lot of people wanting to give this time of year. There's a parish not far from here, actually, where we're recording, and they do, throughout the year, they knit scarves and blankets and children's clothes, things like that, all year, and then they sell them at Christmas time and then donate all the funds to the parish. So we see those kinds of things really burgeoning through parish initiatives, through the leadership of our pastors, and something like JOY can kind of get people moving, but it also helps us point to, if you want to serve, if that's what you want to do, we've got good opportunities through Catholic Charities, through our parishes and schools.
And like we've been saying, it is Giving Tuesday as well, where people can actually donate to charities.
That's
so
true.
It seems like Catholic Charities, again, a number of other donation ideas for their own Catholic diocese as well. Tell me a little bit about where viewers could find more about this Just One Yes campaign. I know Catholics are going to want to follow all this, prayers.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to just be for our diocese. If you want to sign up and receive the meditations because you're from another diocese, feel free. We're not going to say no to anybody that wants to say yes. So arlingtondiocese.org/just1yes is where you can go. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're going to be putting out regular content on this, but it's arlingtondiocese.org/just1yes.
Excellent. Well, like I said, it's a great idea. It sounds like a great campaign, and hopefully it'll get more Catholics involved, not only in your diocese, but across the country and hopefully the world.
Absolutely.
Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer with the Diocese of Arlington and Virginia. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.